What's going on, guys? How you doing? Today's a little different. I'm heading out to meet my buddy Jerome. You may know him as Global Travel Mate. We're going for a bike ride in Bangkok. Hang around Bangkok for a little bit, kind of around the Bangjak, Punyawati area. Let's go.
Hey guys, how are you?
Jerome, the metronome.
Exactly, but not for real. My heart is pumping.
You guys might know him as Global Travel Mate. So we're gonna bike. I've got my experimental bike set up. So I've got we'll see how it goes. I don't know how good it's gonna be, but we'll try it out. Let's go. All right, guys, here we go. Where we're at today, we're going to be biking through a part of Bangkok that runs from Bangjak out to Prakanong. And we're going to be biking along the Klongs here. As you know, I'm out with Jerome, aka Global Travel Mate, today. And I'm just sort of biking in the lead right now, kind of getting us going. He was shooting me from behind. And you guys will get to see Jerome's video technique. He actually bikes one-handed and holds his phone on a gimbal with the other hand while biking, which to me elevates the difficulty level of his videos tenfold. I am so much more impressed with his biking videos now than I was previously. But this is a really interesting area to bike around in Bangkok. A lot of people don't get out here. They don't get to see this unless you live in one of these communities or one of the neighborhoods adjacent to these communities. In this Klong, this is much different than the ones that I bring you guys walking down most of the time, because you can see this is a very large functional Klong. This just isn't an overflow Klong, which is most of the ones that I bring you on are not as functional. They're more of an overflow for rainwater or for stormwater. In this one, you can see there's no beams to block boats or anything like that. So people do boat on here. You will see people fishing on this Klong, and we'll see that a little bit later in the video. Now, obviously, biking here is a bit sketchy for me. I've just started biking again, and it's all I can do to navigate this small area, especially when you have little trees protruding like that one. And the GoPro mounted on the helmet, though, I got to say, is pretty solid as far as stability and the way it looks. So I'm happy with that. Now you can see that there are houses sort of fenced off here that run a little bit deeper off the Klong, and then there are some that come right up to it. And it really just depends on the community that we're in. All right, now you can see Jerome in front of me. Now you can see we have a guardrail on one side and no guardrail on the other side. So you could easily bike off to the right here quite easily, yet Jerome is still, filming with one hand and riding with one hand. So big props to him. Now look at this house, built right onto the edge of the Klong, just sort of on stilts in the waterway. And that's kind of very common. You see that there's a little intersection here. This is actually goes down to another part of the community. There's some stuff floating in the water here. This water is not the cleanest. I definitely wouldn't recommend swimming in it. I probably wouldn't recommend fishing in it either. Like I said, though, we will see some people doing that. You can see the houses here built on stilts, some of these old houses, even though they have a more modern aesthetic, some of them. And then if you look to the left, there's actually a concrete house built into the side of the Klong. Now, this was a little sketchy for me. I had to duck down, getting under the roof here to protect the walkway from rain. And you can see that these are just built right up to the edge, and there's a wall just stopping the water, and that's where these people live. Some of them are living just centimeters above the waterline. Here's a long-tail Klong boat, very common to see in Thailand. And you'll use this to transport goods up and down the Klong, or transport people, or just to travel themselves. Now these little shacks built on the side here, these are usually for fishing or for working on boats. You can see off to the left some more long-tail boats, and there's a couple boats under that house. And then you'll see some of these barrels and things like this. Now, of course, these communities, the way they're designed, the way they're built, they flood as soon as you get a little bit of rain in Thailand. Just a little bit of rain, and these will obviously flood because these Klongs will crest quite quickly. You can see that fishing equipment on the right. And here's a really cool old elevated wood house. You can see they've got the shuttered windows, maybe a little bit of screen in there, but it's just an old wooden house. There's some trash bins out on the Klong. And here we ran into someone who was out walking. Jerome's got his one hand on the bike still, so he had a little stumble. Now check out this fence to the right. A little farm inside there. Obviously you have plenty of access to water, and so it makes a lot of sense. And you see that little walkway down to the right that we just passed. Now here we're coming up on a temple. This is actually the same temple from my PMOC video, Prakanong. This is that same temple, and we're here during the week. So you can see that it's not super busy. It's a weekday that Jerome and I were out biking and people were at work. So the temple and the tourism is not in full blast. But this is the back end of it. I'll link that video up above if you want to check out our tour and our sort of take on this very touristy Wat in the middle of Bangkok that a lot of very famous horror movies have been based off of. So interesting nonetheless. Now we are coming up on this little footbridge that we're going to have to skirt under. Now this was, I believe we had to walk the bikes under here if I remember correctly. Yeah, I had to get off and walk because it was a little bit too low to get the bikes under. Now you can see some people have built elevated footbridges so that boats can still get under even when the Klong is cresting. And there's plenty of space. If you look to the right side of the Klong here, though, there's no wall, right? That is just a dirt mound separating those houses from the actual Klong water, whereas the side we're on is elevated and the whole community is built off the side of that elevation. Now, before Bangkok had roads, before it was the capital of Thailand, when it was still its, original Kruntep, these were the main transport modes for the city. People would ride their boats, their longtails or whatever, up and down these Klongs to move goods, to move people from one part of the city to the other. Now, the area that we're in, Bangjak, Onnut, Prakanong, these areas were very, very far out of what was considered the old Bangkok, the center of the original Bangkok. I stumbled here on the bike a bit, trying to make that transition up the metal plate. So this area would be very, very much agriculture, farm. This wasn't the hopping part of the city that it is today. Onnut arguably is one of the most hip communities for expats, especially on Sukhumvit and Thais in general. That area has become very popular thanks to the BTS running all the way down Sukhumvit. But when Bangkok was originally conceived, when it became a city, that was not the case. And this might not even been considered Bangkok back in the day. I don't know. There's a lady, looks like she's putting something up or pulling down a cage. Again, here's another one of those footbridges off to the right. But, like I was saying, originally these were transportation. You could take these Klongs all the way into Asok, which again, even in the old days, when these Klongs were the key transportation hub, Asok wasn't a really popular part of the city. You'd have to get around the palace, that old part of Thailand. So to see how it is really developed around this, but then that this part of the community, this part of Thai life still exists on the Klong while the rest of the city has blown up around it is really interesting from an urban design perspective, really. And a lot of these houses have been updated over time. Obviously, there's power to all these houses. Most of them have aircon. I don't know about drainage or running water, what that situation is like here, but you can see power running to all of these. And actually, I've been out on other Klongs, and you can see that there's water lines at least going into the houses. I don't know what they do for drainage. So I was talking about, we'll see people fishing. This is actually some people fishing right now. That's what we're looking at. This big net contraption that they have down here in the water is a net. And what they're going to do, they're going to pull a lever on a pivot and pull this net out and see if they get any fish. It is really interesting. Here it goes. And you see them that just muscle it down and pull the net up and see what's caught in there. It's a massive net. This is going to be probably 2 or 3 meters wide. edge to edge. And I believe, yeah, it looks like they got one fish on this pull, so not a lot. And you see they'll throw that in a bucket off to the side, and they'll lower this back down. And they'll just randomly lift that up as they think fish are over it or at a random time. We end up seeing another group of guys doing the same thing a little bit later. And, you know, they weren't getting a ton of success. Not that they were pulling it up out of the clong and they had 50 fish. I think we only saw them catch 2 fish in total the whole time they were doing this. So not a very high success rate, but probably better than just casting a line out in the clong and waiting to catch something, I would imagine. Here we go, crossing one of these little bridges, and not a lot of traffic here, so we're just kind of scooting down. Continuing on with our bike. We really went all over Bangkok on this day. We had a ton of fun. Got to see a lot of the city that people normally don't see. And, you know, Jerome is a realtor. He and his wife own Sukhumvit Homes in Bangkok, and they really deal with the higher end of condos. So places that are built way outside the purview of this type of neighborhood. You can see here, this part of the Klong has become much more shallow, much more narrow. And this is probably an area that's not used as frequently for boating or things of that nature, as it's sort of a transitionary point. Even though it's nice and wide here, it probably has some sections that are not deep enough. Here's a guy, motorcycle wind, driving down the Klong, so just trying to let him pass so he can get by. Pulled off to the side there, sort of a good location for him to stop and let us pull over so he could get by. And here's a little footbridge walking over to someone's house. And here, a lot of these little makeshift awnings and some big bushes on the right. Look at this beautiful blue house on the left. Gorgeous house, very modern, concrete, big glass windows right on the Klong though. And you can see they have probably 50 centimeters between the water and the ground of their property. So a good heavy rain where this Klong backs up by 50 centimeters, which probably isn't all that uncommon, would flood their house. And we stopped here. We're just getting ready to zoom over to this other part of the Klong. We had to wait a little bit. So the video is going to cut right here as we wait for... there was a guy carrying bottles off of the Klong. He had like a big wheelbarrow full of bottles. And look how narrow this one is. Now, on the right, it looks like maybe grass. That's just plants that have grown up out of the Klong. So to the right of me, there's a little bit of dirt, but if I were to fall to the right, I would fall right into like a marshy area. It wouldn't necessarily be land. It wouldn't be 100% water, but it wouldn't be land for sure. And you can see how narrow this has gotten here. Again, now that there's more bridges, we're probably not going to see too many boats making it up and down this section of the Klong. This is really more of a footpath, and this waterway is probably mostly used for storm overflow or rain overflow to help manage the city's water situation. Look at this little wooden footbridge. Oh, you wouldn't catch me walking on that. Now we've got a lady up ahead. You can see her holding the parasol, the umbrella, keeping herself safe from the sun. It was rather sunny that day. And so we're just kind of waiting for her to get to a location where she can potentially step to the side and we can pass. That way we're not causing any sort of jam. Here we go. Jerome with his one hand technique. You got to give respect to that one hand technique, Jerome. Killing it out here on the bike paths. And apparently he does this on the city streets as well with the one hand. just shooting it. No, so we thought this lady was going to step into that area, but she did not, so we just scooted past her. And you can see these walkways shoot off to the right, they go left. You know, there's all these different areas that you can shoot down. And look at how lush and green it is off to the right, but there's still houses built in and around here. This is one of the really great things about Bangkok, that parts of the city, parts of this sort of older way of living, this more cultural way of living in the city have remained, while larger buildings or communities have popped up around them. Now, I know not everyone thinks that's fantastic, but to me, this is just a great layer, a great piece of texture in Bangkok that this still exists, that it hasn't been pushed out. You know, are the living conditions the best here? I don't know. I would assume by looking at it, maybe not, but people are still choosing to live in these areas for the most part. So really, really interesting complexity of Bangkok as a city and the way the city has grown and been designed. I'm really, really fortunate to be able to see this and share this with you guys. I really do love these aspects of Thailand, of Bangkok especially. And these neighborhoods, you know, I've never had trouble going down a Klong. Jerome has never had an issue. People here tend to be incredibly nice. I mean, just like, you know, if you're good to people, people for the most part will be good to you. Of course, there are always bad actors, but I've never had those issues. Again, this is part of the Klong is widening out a little bit, and you can see the house on the stilts here. This guy was giving us some room to get by. Now we're coming up on the end of the ride, guys, so you know, I hope you enjoyed this area of Bangkok and checking out these Klongs. I think this is just a really unique perspective on the city. Whew, what's going on, guys? Crazy day. We've been going for like 2.5 hours with Jerome, global travel mate, also Sukhumvit Homes. If you guys are looking to move here and you're looking for something on the higher end of apartments, like what's your minimum, like 80, 100?
Yeah, 75, 80.
Yeah, if that's your range that you're starting at, he's the guy to see. And actually, some dope apartment tours on Sukhumvit Homes, like crazy places where I'm just like,
yeah, check it out.
That exists. And then global travel mate, he'll show you all the neighborhoods of Bangkok in like a very kind of homey way, like the way that you want to live there. Probably not these neighborhoods that we just went through today. You're probably not renting here.
You get the right apartments, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, some of these Klongs, it's amazing to see the way that the communities are built up around the water.
Yeah.
Like we saw people actually fishing for their lunch with these huge nets. I thought that was
That
crazy.
was really cool.
That was awesome.
And the thing is, also along the Klongs, there's actually quite a lot of these big, how you call it, like gated communities.
Yeah.
So, and it looks really far away, but it's just
We're
around
in the middle of the city.
Yeah, because this is where we're now at 100 and, no, at 77.
Yeah, we're not even like past Onnut. So
yeah, exactly.
I mean, you're right on the fringe of like downtown and W District, not far.
Exactly.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Go check out Global Travel Mate, Sukhumvit Homes. And until next time, keep taking action, make your ideas reality.
See you guys.